Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and today we have some spoilers like we normally do for Campaign 3 of Critical Role up to episode 119. So, if you aren't caught up, I recommend getting caught up before watching this video. In episode 119 of Campaign 3 of Critical Role, the Bell's Hells had to finally make their choice as to what they were going to do with the power of Predathos. The choices presented to them beforehand were do nothing with the power of Predathos and let things continue on as they were and just reseal it away. Kill the gods, basically, removing all divinity from Exandria, or make the gods run off. Effectively the same thing, removing any divinity from Exandria altogether. Or, there was a last choice, to restructure the way the relationship works with the mortals. This was the vague option that the matron gave them, which was, something outside of what she foretold, right? She truly believed the only options were to run them off / kill them, or to just keep things the way they were. And if they were to restructure something, they would have to have something to lord over the gods, aka the power of Predathos. She didn't really give any specifics as to what she thought this could mean. But in classic D&D fashion, the players have found a different option that the DM didn't think about. An option rooted in the history of calamity, a option rooted in the history of downfall. The Bell's House suggested that the gods shed their immortal forms and become mortal, much like they did during the downfall event where they stormed into Aor. And today, I want to talk about the potential of what all of that means and the fucking cool-ass future it could present for Critical Role. So, what does this mean for the gods, if the gods agree to it? Well, it means they're going to have to restart life as a baby somewhere on Exandria, which means that eventually they're going to have to grow up into an adult, where the Raven Queen mentioned that they would likely remember who they were in a past life. Meaning, it's kind of going to be like Jesus walking amongst the people, which I think is kind of interesting and kind of cool. Or they could just keep themselves sheltered away. Having this divinity, having the idea of, a secret god somewhere else. But it also means that the gods likely won't be able to reach out to their followers for potentially 15, 20 years, right? Which is a little bit of an issue for a lot of people, as a lot of them are followers of the gods. But I do like the idea that these gods will have to, remember who they are. And eventually it means that they can likely grow old and die. Now, speaking of them growing old and dying, is there a possibility that they can constantly reincarnate? Could they potentially reincarnate multiple times? And what does that mean? Does that mean they get to do effectively what the Kryn dynasty does? Does that confirm that the Luxon is effectively one of the former lights that used to live in Tengar? I think that's a cool possibility. That it almost confirms that one of the lights of Tengar came before the rest of the gods, and they created everything, and then their sisters and brethren showed up afterwards. I think that's fascinating. It's just the idea of that almost being confirmed through the idea of reincarnation of the gods, but it also means that the gods have to constantly be in the cycle of sort of, growing old, learning their powers again, learning who they used to be, and then eventually struggling with the idea that they're going to become another person. It'll almost be like Doctor Who, where they constantly have to regenerate into someone new, and they lose sort of personality aspects, the person becomes different. It effectively means every X amount of years when that god dies, it means a new version of that god is going to appear, because that person is going to grow up in a different way each time. They're going to grow up poor and ragged and, hold ideals differently. It effectively means the idea of betrayers and prime deities is gone, because every time they are reborn, they're going to be a different person. You're right. Asmodeus in one lifetime is going to be a very happy child who's born rich and have no value of fucking anything, and everything's just, free to him, so that when he's an adult, he doesn't give a shit about that. When people beg for him for money, he's like, why are you begging me for money? Do something else with your life, right? Or he's going to grow up poor one time, and he's going to be a street rat, a street urchin, and the concept of money is going to be something that he holds dear to his heart. And that in this version of him, he's going to be very charitable. And when people come to ask him for help, he's going to give them help. I think this is fucking fascinating. And the idea that there's effectively going to be a bunch of these gods constantly shifting who they are is really interesting if they can reincarnate. Will this create power vacuums when one of them dies? Absolutely. It means that a domain of divinity is going to be left open. And I think another sort of interesting aspect of this is if they do reincarnate and like power vacuums are constantly created, there are going to be people who attempt to kill the gods off, but then make sure that their child becomes the reincarnation. And I think that is fucking interesting. The idea that if they can reincarnate, and if, you know, people can somehow manipulate the rebirth cycle of these gods, what does that mean for, like, you know, how safe the gods are in general? And how often are they going to be attacked by people? There's going to be a bunch of people who, in the name of their god, want to make it their child. Will the gods be able to pick on what plane they live? Will they have to live in the material plane? Or could they theoretically live in the Fae realm and become an Archfey? Or, you know, sort of reincarnate into an Archfey's child? Or, you know, any number of things. Can they live on them, like any sort of plane of fire, elemental plane, or something like that? The Shadowfell. Where do these gods end up? That's a fascinating question, and I think it changes, you know, how things work for each of them depending on where they go. Because effectively, Archfey are immortal, right? So they would just be losing their fucking immortality to go into another life of immortality, which means that they won't have to reincarnate later. And I think that's pretty interesting. But if they are forced to the material plane, this still also means, do they get to pick what kind of race they are? Do they get to be a longer living elf? Do they have to be the short living turtle? What happens? Do they end up in a, you know, do they get to pick where they live? Do they get to be rich as a child? Do they get to be poor as a child? Do they get to live in a, you know, immediate, like, living lifestyle? Do they have to be born into a family of generals? Do they have to be born into the family of kings, queens, sovereigns, emperors? Where do they end up? Is it a choice or not? And I think these are fucking interesting storytelling aspects for the future of Campaign 4 if they do elect to continue with Exandria. And if they do go down this route, the idea that gods can spur up fucking anywhere is hilarious to me. A good question that I saw a handful of people asking, what does this mean for angels and other lesser deities? Now, I kind of want to point to Downfall for this, because in Downfall, we actually got to see a handful of angels, and realistically, they didn't seem that much weaker than what they were before. And I think this points to the true disparity, or the difference between gods and their lesser deities. And I don't think they're going to be impacted all of that much by them going away, because if they didn't before in Downfall, I don't see why it would affect them now. So just to sort of put that idea at ease, I think angels and other deities like that are going to be fine. All of this, to me, this choice specifically, could set up incredibly interesting future plot lines for future campaigns. Eventually, down the line, if the gods can reincarnate, one of the player characters could end up being a god during a campaign, and they would recall who they were, the travesties that they've committed, the good deeds they might have committed, all of the shit they've done in the past, in the however long these gods have been around. This person, who is somewhere likely roughly within their 15 to maybe 30s, would remember who they were during a campaign, adding another layer of complexity to that character. I think that's really fascinating and really interesting. The idea that we could have this moment where this person sort of realizes, oh shit, I've been someone else before. Oh shit, I was a fucking horrible human being, and now I can be better. I think that's interesting and really cool, and we would be able to see it in a player character. Now, could this lead to issues like main character syndrome? Possibly, but it would still be fun to see eventually down the line. And there's one last aspect of this that I haven't really talked about quite yet, and that is Ludinus Deleth, and how he could still theoretically enact his plan of killing off the gods if they became mortal. You see, if they became mortal and they can't reincarnate, and eventually they have to, say, pick a successor down the line to sort of fill in their spot as they are going to die one day, Ludinus could fucking kill them. Ludinus could find the gods and slowly, one by one, go on a murdering spree, killing young gods, killing the people who he fucking despises and hates, and the fact that they were given a third option that he was not a fucking fan of, and get rid of them once and for all by his cold, nearly dead hands. I think that could be a super interesting plot hook for Campaign 4. Like, the people have to pick defenders of gods, and Ludinus is going to kill them. Or one of Ludinus's many followers who sort of takes up the mantle of being the bad guy, of being the one who's going to get rid of the gods. Because there are going to still be people who fucking hate them. There's still going to be people out there who want them gone because of the terrible things they've done in the past, even though these people who they've reincarnated into might not be the same. They might be good people. They might be nice people. But we will never truly know because Ludinus is going to try to snuff them out. So let me know what you think about this choice. Do you think it is honestly leading towards the most interesting outcome for this campaign like I do? I truly believe this was the best choice they could have made. Killing the gods would have been boring. Keeping the gods around would have been boring. This, to me, is fascinating. The idea the gods will be brought down to their level and potentially only get one life is really interesting and really cool. And the potential plot hooks that I can see coming off this is awesome. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think this is a cool idea? Do you think they should have gone with something else? Let me know. And I will see you guys on Friday for the recap of episode 120 of Campaign 3. Potentially the last episode, but who knows? I'll see you guys then. Peace.